What does diversity mean to me?
Well, I think that diversity is...
I would define diversity as pretty basically just a difference among people or even things in an environment.
many different people coming from many different backgrounds and coming together to share their ideas.
Having students and faculty and people of all different backgrounds, ethnically and as far as society goes and where they're from.
The idea that anyone from any background or race or sexual orientation or whatever feels comfortable being all together in one organization.
Seeing each person in their uniqueness and being able to appreciate that uniqueness and the differences that people bring to different situations or relationships.
Difference in looks, difference in background, difference in thoughts is very important.
People's origins and things they can't control, and also just how their opinions have evolved throughout their life.
So you can have big diversity, like very obvious differences between people that are visual. So when you see someone, you might see them as being tall, short, different skin colors, different backgrounds, gender, everything that you can kind of see in someone's when you look at them or perceive when you see someone. But you can also have diversity of background, socioeconomic class. You could have diversity about your childhood, your upbringing, what country you were raised in, all sorts of different types of diversity.
I think I'm drawn into two sort of modes when I think about that. I have a knee-jerk reaction of how I would define diversity, and then I start to think about maybe what parts of diversity am I overlooking with that knee-jerk reaction. So I think the thing that comes up for me immediately is racial diversity.
How have I seen or experienced it at Bush?
In the work that I do here in the academic support office, I know that there's a lot of diversity in how people learn.
When I think about diversity and how I've experienced it here at Bush, the energy that I'm feeling right now, I feel after many years of almost kind of stagnancy, I do feel some forward momentum, and that makes me really hopeful.
I think that although diversity or the quest for diversity is obviously not perfect at Bush, at least there's an attempt. I think financial aid helps a lot with that, because not just, diversity is not just about race, it's about socioeconomic status and all those other things. So I think that's really helpful. It brings in different perspectives too.
I don't think I really interact with only one group, so I think that for me, I have a pretty diverse experience at Bush.
I mean, there are obviously spaces for that, but you really have to seek them out. I feel like I've found diversity through different clubs and affinity groups, and I mean, it's interesting that I would find diversity within an affinity group, because the whole point is that we're there because we have shared experiences. But I feel within groups like BOC and stuff, we still all have very different experiences.
So I grew up in Seattle, and I see Bush looking very different than it did when I was growing up here, or at least my perception of the school growing up. So it seems like the school has is taking the initiative to try to diversify, but there is still a lot of room for growth.
So this is my 5th year at the Bush School, and I have seen a few things. I have seen the conversations around diversity really elevated, both from the students' perspective and also from the faculty, and that's diversity around socioeconomic diversity, racial and ethnic diversity, religious diversity, gender expression, sexual orientation, and the ways in which I think students have embraced those identities and said, this is part of who I am and I want to feel that represented, and the way the adults have taken from the students the sense of how important this is, and been able to engage in really thoughtful, meaningful, and sometimes difficult conversations has really grown in that 5 years.
Each decade we've made progress when we think about who the Bush School was in the 1920s, in the 40s, in the 80s, and now in 2019. Like, we have made great strides in creating a more inclusive community, and I think we're still on a journey and have like more work to do, and have people who care, students who care, who help us to ask and answer big questions, families, school leadership, teachers, and so continuing to really understand what does that word mean to us, who does it mean we want here, and how do we get people here in a way that they feel valued, seen, and heard.
I would love to see more faculty of color. I know that as a person of color, living in a predominantly white society, I know that I hungered for people who look like me, who are role models, who are outside of my family, people who would come from different backgrounds and have different stories, but look like me.
The thing that's really been sticking with me is that when there is a crisis or a moment or something that is kind of slapped in the face of people that don't always have to think about it, you know, I've been in some ways grateful to see that people react to that and see that and feel that, and that is really important. I think the work that can still be done is when the chaos subsides and the people that don't have to think about it every single day can go back to not thinking about it every single day, can walk on their lives.
And opening up the conversation to families as well, to make sure that they feel included in this conversation. It is really not enough for our students to feel safe and secure and included in the community, but unless their parents, guardians, siblings are feeling the same way, then I don't think you can really consider yourself a truly inclusive community. So open up those conversations. We've done some of that through adult affinity groups as well. So we have a group that's called the Afro Diaspora Groups. Those are for parents with children who identify as Black. We have a Jewish affinity group, and a bilingual affinity group. So giving real voice to those parents to say the experience parenting someone who is not part of the majority population here at Bush will look and feel different. So I think creating more opportunities for that will.
I think a lot of that starts with the faculty, actually. I think that if we create a more diverse staff, then students will be more willing to come in because they'll see a kind of visual safety net.
A lot of like history-based classes and English-based classes will sort of touch on diversity and race. Well, my English class is actually, the unit is almost completely focused on race. So I get it a little from all different sources.
The thing I like about what's going on campus is that it's open enough to have conversation, and not that those conversations are easy, but I feel like people are willing to have conversation on campus about diversity and about differences, even though it might be an uncomfortable place for them.
I would love to see diversity increase in all different aspects. So the obvious skin color, obvious backgrounds, nationalities, but also all the other things like socioeconomic class, your gender, your everything.
I would say a good goal to strive toward would be getting to a point where people wouldn't think about somebody else's race. Not in terms of not acknowledging any hardships that their particular race or gender or socioeconomic class have suffered in the past, but just being able to have people from incredibly diverse backgrounds being openly comfortable with people and no one having to feel like they are either left out or feel like they're below a different group for one reason or another.
We're always taking a multi-pronged approach to ways that we can develop a diverse community, an inclusive community, and we continue to sort of push forward with those pieces. So that can be outreach to communities outside of our school. It can be engaging staff who holds that as a primary value. It can be engaging our students and families of diverse backgrounds within our program to help tell the story. I think it also goes beyond just enrolling students and families, but also thinking about what their experience is like once they get here and how we help to make sure that is positive. And so I think continuing to keep all of those things top of mind are things that help us to set our priorities for our work on behalf of the school.
We say like we value diversity, or I say I value diversity, and I think that's a question to really dig into, like why, to really believe it. I know it to be true, but to say like, okay, so why? And let's explain that. Let's not just say it. Let's back it up and say, here's why.